This is Business Incorporated, and we're back to you 20 minutes to the top of the hour. The federal government of Nigeria has plans to split the state's National Petroleum Corporation, known as the NNPC, into 30 independent companies in a restructuring never seen before. And that's designed to help tackle corruption at the NNPC. Mismanagement and graft at the oil group has hampered an industry that provides around 70% of the country's national income in Africa's biggest crude producer. And plans to break up the company are part of efforts to dismantle NNPC's opaque structures that enable theft. The group head, Emmanuel Ibekachiku, said titles like Group Executive Directors are going to disappear. In their place, they have Chief Executive Officers or CEOs, and they are going to take responsibilities for their titles. President Muhammadu Buhari has made reforming the nation's oil sector a priority as the slump in oil prices has hammered the economy, since crude exports accounts for around 95% of Nigeria's earnings. Kachiku also said members of OPEC plans to meet other oil producers in Russia around March the 20th for talks on how to freeze oil output and unfreeze oil prices. Let's talk about the global oil giant Shell. Now has been sued in London for the second time in 5 years over spills in Nigeria's oil-rich Niger Delta. Two communities are claiming compensation and want Shell Petroleum to clean up their land. Shell Petroleum says it is an early stage in reviewing the claims and that the case should be heard in a Nigerian court. The Ogale community of about 40,000 people in River State in Nigeria's Niger Basin, who are mainly farmers and fishermen, are some of the latest claimants. Now the question is, can cash really fix the Niger Delta oil spill? I'm now being joined from London by the Vice President in charge of risk analysis at Teneo Intelligence, Manji Cheto. Manji, it's good to see you. Is there a lot of sunshine in London at this time yet?
Very unusually, yes, there is, and we're very glad for it as well.
And I can feel I can see the sun on your face. Really?
Yes, there is. Very sunny day today.
Amazing. What's the temperature?
It's actually still quite cold. It's I think it's around about 6 degrees right now. So don't be fooled by the sun. But
you're standing by the window and taking in all the vitamins, isn't it?
This is a rare opportunity, boys, and so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I've been part of that sometime a couple of years ago. So I know what it is. Everybody's just down at the square and everybody's trying to have their lunch and bathe in the sun.
Exactly.
Very interested, very interested. And I can see the way you dress it, just truly African and enjoying it. Wish you were here. Okay, let's get out to business. Talk to us about this. This is a very interesting story about a human angle story disaster. Now, do you think the compensations being paid by Shell Petroleum is enough to fix the problems with the Niger Delta? Do you think it's a matter of cash?
Well, I mean, in all of these cases, it's really not a matter of cash, because no amount of cash can actually reverse the damage that has been done to people's livelihoods, particularly damage that has been done over decades. So I think for the communities, actually, I think the principle here is important. And speaking on the principle, I think one of the things that people don't realize about the significance of this case is the fact that this is, the communities have sued SPDC, Shell Petroleum Development Corporation, which is actually Royal Dutch Shell's local subsidiary in Nigeria. So this is effectively a Nigerian company being tried in the UK for crimes allegedly committed in Nigeria. And I think that is obviously quite significant, because it could potentially set a precedent in the sector, and particularly as Nigeria is obviously trying to develop its mining sector, for example. These sorts of cases usually come up in the extractive industry. So I think, from this case is definitely one to watch from a kind of operational point of view. But there's also a political angle here, right, with this case. One being the fact that the reason why the courts in London have approved this case to be tried in the UK is because the communities have said that the Nigerian courts and cases like this tend to languish for years in the Nigerian courts. So it's really an indictment on Nigeria's judicial system as well.
Isn't it interesting, Cheto, that Shell had made some payment before to compensate some inhabitants of the Niger Delta where oil spill had occurred before, £20 million to develop an entire community and things like that. So Shell is not really new to this kind of issue because it's one of the world's leading oil giants. But what makes Nigeria's case really, really different? As soon as this money gets into the hands of the people in the Niger Delta, do you think they're going to spend this money cleaning up the land, or they're going to take this money and take care of their basic daily lives?
Well, I think this is part of the argument that Royal Dutch Shell is certainly trying to make, that, you know, it's one, the company feels that it is being punished for criminal acts that are being committed by people who potentially could be from one of these communities as well, pipeline vandalism, because this is really about oil spills. And therefore, Shell's argument is, you know, this is not just negligence on our part. Our pipelines have actually been vandalized by local communities, by road groups, and actually we're being made to you know, we're effectively carrying the burden for this. So there certainly is that risk that, you know, the money, once Shell hands those the money that they've paid in compensation to these communities, there certainly is an issue here of you know, potential misappropriation of those funds, which brings us right back to exactly why the case is being brought to London anyway, because the communities have argued that Nigeria is just not sufficient to address the social justice issues here. And I think, you know, we could potentially be seeing a situation where we're going in a round robin here.
Well, finally, Cheto, Shell Petroleum is not the only one guilty here. Almost all the oil companies operating within the Niger Basin, Nigeria, potential oil spillage. So, but why does it all the time look like Shell Petroleum is the whipping boy?
Well, I mean, Shell Petroleum Development Corporation obviously has got the largest, well, historically has had the largest onshore assets in Nigeria, with most of the companies operating more offshore. So obviously Shell is getting a lot of, and this is actually related to Ogoni land as well. So Shell's assets obviously are largely in the Ogoni land, and hence why these cases are coming from within the region that encompasses the Ogoni land. So you know, it's no coincidence. But let's be clear here, other international oil companies operating in Nigeria will be watching this case very closely, because this could potentially precipitate similar claims against them as well. So I think we're really just at the beginning rather than the end of what could be a very protracted process and what could trigger more cases.
You cover sub-Saharan Africa. I beg your pardon, I've got to break that. For final question, do you think this is a case for other oil-producing African states, Angola, Ghana, Kenya getting into the oil game, and others as well?
Well, it could be slightly different, because obviously if you look across the continent in terms of the oil assets across the continent, a lot of that is actually largely offshore. So that could potentially insulate countries. But, you know, Angola, for example, I mean, we do have some onshore assets there. So potentially, yes, that could come up. And also in the new oil frontiers in Africa, obviously the oil prices determine whether or not those frontiers get developed. But I think, yes, a lot of people on the African continent, and really not just Africa, I mean, we're talking about other oil producing regions as well in the world, will be watching this, because potentially this case could give them recourse to justice outside the jurisdiction of which the crime was allegedly committed.
Okay, Cheto, just hang around the windows there and enjoy more of the sun. The London sun. Thank you. Have a lunchtime. Cheto Manji, Vice President in charge of risk analysis at Teneo Intelligence. The business of extraction, very delicate. So let's move on to Latin America, where the owners of a Brazilian mine that breached a dam setting off a deadly mudslide has agreed to pay 4.4 billion reals. That's about 804 million pounds in damages. Samarco, co-owned by Vale and BHP Billiton, will pay 2 billion reals in 2016 and another 1.2 billion each in 2017 and 2018. The Brazilian government originally demanded 20 billion reals to address what is considered Brazil's worst environmental disaster. In November last year, 2 Samarco dams ruptured, setting off a deadly mudslide. Under the terms of the agreement, Brazilian Vale and Australian BHP Billiton will be jointly responsible for the payments if Samarco cannot make those payments.
Hoje, menos de 4 meses depois do desastre, e apesar do sofrimento que abalou e ainda abala.
Today, 4 months after the disaster, and despite the suffering which took hold of and continues to take hold of the region, we welcome this deal with Samarco as part of the process of repairing the damages to the population, which is what it is first and foremost, as well as an environmental project and one of recuperating the River Dosi and the life that always lived in it, and we want to continue living in it.
When we return after the break, we'll take a look at today's trading at the FMDQ OTC Securities Exchange. What's been trending between the bills and the bonds? We'll be right back with that.